Let's rock.
All right, next up we have our closing presentation. It's all about building trust and external development relationships. Adrien Cho is the vendor and outsourcing manager at 343 Industries working on Halo 5 Guardians. He joined 343 in 2010 to help build a new team that would shepherd the Halo franchise. And in 2012, the team shipped Halo 4 for the Xbox 360. Prior to 343, Adrien was the lead technical artist and the art producer at BioWare, where he worked on the Mass Effect series, Dragon Age, and Neverwinter Nights. Joining him is Erik Egerup. Erik is working as studio art director at Dhruva Interactive, now in its 18th year, India's oldest and most experienced game company. Dhruva is a leading provider of game production services to the global games industry. Erik has played a vital role working on projects with Microsoft, Sony, Remedy, and 343, to name a few. Please give me a round of applause to welcome Erik and Adrien to the stage.
Hi, my name is Adrien Cho. I'm the art and vendor outsourcing manager at 343.
And I'm Erik Egerup, studio art director at Dhruva Interactive.
Just wanted to say thank you for coming to our presentation. It's been a great conference, and we know it's a long day, so we're hoping that this last presentation will send off the conference with a bang. When Erik and Dhruva asked me if I would be interested in doing a collaborative talk at the next XDS, I was very interested, and we hadn't arrived to a topic, and we took a long time to brainstorm and talk about, what's the intent? What kind of talk would we like to give to our peers? Because we felt in the past XDSs, it's been really great to get a group of us all together to focus on outsourcing, and how could we contribute something new to the community? And so we talked a lot, and we thought some of the best talks were the ones that are really natural. The things that came out of the previous XDSs were just kind of honest talks from developers and said, this was our experience. So we hope this talk will kind of give you a bit of insight into our development process. In this case, we focus on trust, and this was a new relationship, a new external engagement that we've had with two different studios. So we thought this might be an interesting topic for you guys to hear about on this last day of XDS. So just as a quick overview of some of the things that we'll go over in the next 30 minutes, we'll go over the starting points, basically just the initial conditions of where our studios were, and just kind of give you an idea of where we're at. In the introduction, we'll kind of go over how we define trust, some of the goals that both studios want to achieve, when to focus on trust and how to focus on trust. The next section really is about how we build that trust. How do we go about it? A holistic view and slow ramp-ups and close engagement. We'll talk a bit about results. We put all the theory in practice. What are the things that we observed? What are some of the benefits we saw from this? Some of the challenges we faced, and some case studies. We'll do some conclusion, and then we'll leave a few minutes at the end for some Q&A.
Okay, let's get started. So our starting point in this was basically 1.5 years ago, and we were two studios that hadn't been working together before. Even if we're at Dhruva had been working a lot with Microsoft studios before, we never had the opportunity to work with 343. The other thing was we made the pilot test, so there was at least a baseline that we knew we could hit the quality, and we knew kind of the expectations of 343 for this project. But from our side, it was a new art direction, it was a new style for us, and we knew that we really had to quickly understand their view and their vision of this new game. Of course, there's also cultural differences. We are based in Bangalore, India, and it's almost the opposite of the world. And that is something, especially in the beginning, that can have an impact.
I think with each engagement, and everyone in this room will face different challenges, and we really just want to acknowledge that these were some of the initial conditions that we were faced with. And this talk really focused about how how we as two different studios approach this. And what I really liked about engaging with Erik and Dhruva's team was they're really open about, really upfront when we first said, hey, we're kind of interested in pursuing an external development relationship. They're really open about improving things. They said, hey, like, we want to work with you. How can we make this awesome? So, we chatted about the differences, and then we arrived at what were some of the goals that both studios wanted to achieve. So for me, I believe in long-term partnership. I think the upfront cost and investment into a partner will pay off in dividends in the long term, and it might take a little bit longer to start up. But the idea is that you kind of have a longer scope and you look at the bigger picture. And so the slow months that you begin will pay off in the years and years. And really when we started to develop a relationship, it was in the hopes of that we'd find a long-term partner. Flexible resources, I'm sure everyone here for external development is always looking for help with their internal studio and being able to find good support. High efficiency and high quality art. For our studio, my main focus is really high quality art. I know everyone has different constraints, and I just want to put that out there. I was a little bit less concerned about production time and cost at this point. We had built an internal studio that was with some of the best artists I've ever worked with, and so it was really important to get buy-in from them that they can trust an external developer, and then support for the internal team. The one point I wanted to bring up was Halo 4 was really the first time that 343 kind of came together, and there wasn't a lot of trust internally. It took a lot, and it took 3 years of battling, and when we finally shipped the title, the internal team started to trust each other. Gaining trust of the external partner was much trickier. And so for the next project, for Halo 5, we acknowledged the fact that we wanted to broaden the scope of external development. And so we really looked at wanting to engage partners to be able to support our internal team to help kind of build this awesome game on a new platform.
Yeah, and when we look at these goals, and also going back to the starting point where we knew that we had quality, but it was also a new engagement and new art direction and style, we knew that we really had to start focusing on trust. So that became our main goal. There's always other things, of course. We don't say that we don't look at other things. It's just that trust became something that we really focused on in the beginning. So what is trust? Well, I like this quote from Holmes and Rempel, and it says, "Trust is a way of reducing uncertainties." And that was really what we needed. We needed to reduce uncertainties. We knew the quality was there, but we didn't want any weird things to happen during production. So when to focus on trust? Well, I like to call it beyond the specification document, because if everything is like spec'd out and you have like a simple asset and a very exact specification document, well, then you don't need much trust. But as most game development, and I think especially on 343, it's very agile and it's full of change, and things are always changing throughout the process, and then trustworthiness becomes key. So going back to a little bit the science, the social science about trust, and how the kind of science defines trust, there's a couple of components of trust, and it's based on trustworthiness. We have 5 of them, and it doesn't matter if you look at personal relationship trust or if you look at business or other professional ways of looking at trust. These 5 will always come up in a lot of the readings. And it's reliability, which basically means that you have to deliver in time. Honesty, taking responsibility for what you're doing, but also being honest if something goes wrong or whatever happens. Competence, of course, even if it's my brother or my really old friend, if he doesn't have the competence, I won't trust him to do the work. Then benevolence, the will to do good, and openness, which is kind of similar to honesty, but really just being transparent. These 5 factors, if you have these 5 factors, you will have a really good platform to build trust quickly. So going back to this kind of trust is a way of reducing uncertainties, well, we wanted to mitigate fear, because fear is something that can come in between, and especially people that are not believers of external development. We don't want them to fear kind of the fear of disappointment, because that can lead to more complex processes and less efficiency. And instead of building trust, it will remove the chance of benefiting a trustworthy relationship. Instead, gaining trust automatically reduces the risk of disappointment, and that, I think, is the key. The third aspect of mitigating fear is vulnerability, and you can see this in 2 different ways. One way is a more human vulnerability, like showing that you can do mistakes or that you're human, basically. But another way is also can be a little bit more professional. I'll give you an example. Like, Adrien might need 20 artists to work, but he can't promise me that throughout these 6 months, all of those artists will have work to do. So he says, okay, if there's no work, I will at least pay for 10 of the artists, even if it's downtime. In that way, I feel that, okay, he will make everything he can to get the work to me, because he is vulnerable to not having that work. And it's a simple way, but it's really an easy way to build a trust, together with the other things I talked about. So going more to the artist, for example, I think it's coming back to the specification document, and if you just know what to do and how to do it, which is basically if you read the document, then you can only do okay or you can fail. But when you start building trust, people start asking why are things like they are, how is it going to be used? You start wanting to do more. And when you do that, you start creative thinking, motivation gets higher. You want to do added value and optimization, efficiency, and all these things. You can still fail. I'm not saying that we never fail, but you also have the possibility to do great or even awesome. So give every artist the chance to do that, and that's really the key.
I think one point, sorry,
Yeah.
I always forget, on that one is when we look for engagement with a partner, the bare minimum is great, but when we find a partner that could do 110%, that's phenomenal. I think trust, when you start trusting a partner, that's what we really look for, like not only in our internal team, but someone to exceed what the expectations are. And when you say, just beyond the specification doc, that's great. That's when, like you're firing on all cylinders, you trust that they understand what your needs are, but they also deliver above and beyond.
Yeah. So, and what that also means is that we take expectation, and with trust, we divert it into motivation. Because a really high expectation, it can become very stressful. I know myself when I was an artist and you got this like big thing that you not really know how to solve, it can be really stressful. But if you have trust from whoever is giving this thing, then it rather becomes motivation. And I saw that in my team, that the higher the expectation became, the higher the motivation became, rather than being stressful or something negative. I want to remove unnecessary overhead. Like I said before, I want the artist to focus on art. I want art director to focus on art direction, and producer on production. Let everyone trust each other to do their job and focus on what they're best at. Now, we're going to switch a little bit. We're going to go over to building trust. This was a little bit of introduction about how we see trust and also a little bit the theories about trust. But how did we build trust, and what did we see when during these one and a half year? So the classic way of building trust is client vendor, of course, and usually it can be the outsourcing manager towards to the business dev manager. But it's also important that you look at it holistically. You have to look at every part of the team. So here, in a sense, Adrien has to go down and convince his artists, his art managers, his art director that this is the right thing to do. In the same way, my biz dev has to convince me, or I have to convince my artists that this is an awesome project. Please give your 120%. Be honest, be open. They will trust us. Like, we really need to help building this trust. And one thing that we managed to do in this project was that we're not only connecting at that top level. We, through different tools like Concept Share or conference calls and even coming on studio visits, we managed to get different people to talk directly to each other. So even down to like IT talking to IT, and they can figure their things out, building the trust between each other rather than going up to some manager that then has to go to the manager and then down to the IT. And at the end, everyone started to connect with everyone in a way, and this really builds a connection between the two studios that we've seen in other talks as well. Is really important to build that trust.
I was going to go back one slide, but
okay.
Can we do that? One extra point here was that yeah, we looked a little bit more in depth. And I think one day you guys had brought up, it was like, our business dev people were actually, had to be trust between them too. And it's really funny, it went above and beyond just the top level, and it was great to see, our IT teams connecting together, most importantly, I think artist to artist. And so this whole web of kind of trust permeated just above and beyond just the outsourcing manager and business dev manager relationship. And one of the key things that I do want to point out here was kind of having evangelists is you have to build that trust within your team, and then from that, they will spread the word out to the team, and they will build that trust between the team will kind of come naturally and organically. And one of the key things was making sure you get buy-in from a few key people from your art team, and they will, if the results turn out good, kind of this amazing organic thing just kind of happens, and this interconnected web develops. So moving on how we build trust, I'm a firm believer of having a slow ramp up. If your project allows it kind of gives you time for the teams to explore, to understand each other and get to know each other. And one of the first things to do is set reasonable expectations. Our team, they've worked together for years, and they've gone through a lot, but they're so much harder on an external team. So when you're starting a new engagement, it's really important to let everyone know, it's like, hey, they're really talented artists, but it's really hard to expect them to have the same output as someone who's been an expert on this field for the past 4 years. And then I think the key kind of philosophical approach is I call them kind of kiddie mitts, but it's setting them up for success. You don't want to put too much on them. You want the partner to feel that they're doing good, and then you kind of ramp up as you need to. Test holistically. Don't always just have your eye on the end prize. Always kind of evaluate throughout the whole process. It's not just about the final artwork. It's all about how are the teams communicating together. How's the billing process? How's QAing? How's feedback developing? And then if any one of those areas need work on, it's important to kind of focus on that and make sure there's no weak links. Continually to monitor the relationship, expand when the time is right, and choose the right people. And I think this is actually really important especially during the slow ramp-up phase, is you want to select people on your team that are open-minded to this. If someone doesn't believe in external development, it's probably not the best time to try to convert them. Find someone who, in this case, one of our first projects together was we found an art lead that was at least open to the idea. They realized that they had a ton of work and that external development could actually help them out. And once they realize that, you get the buy-in from them, they're like, oh, cool, like I can actually send some stuff out to some team an external team, and they get back quality work. They start seeing the benefit to them. So close engagement. How do we get the teams together? Being very honest, I think, is and upfront. It's very important. I'm using Concept Share as an example. We kind of developed this partway through when we realized that we were using, and I apologize for this. We were using email as the way to initially communicate. And after a few pilot tests and after a few cycles, we realized that was really hindering our team's ability to communicate effectively with each other. So in this case, I just use concept share as an example, but it could be anything. But it was a way to foster kind of openness and have honest feedback. We want the team to be able to tell the other team exactly how they feel, because that would help them ultimately. And in this case, we got the artist to be able to directly tell the other artist, say, hey, this is working great, awesome. These are areas that we're not happy about, fix it. And we kind of removed the middleman. We let the artist kind of communicate directly with the other team. Competence. It's kind of an interesting idea. And this one kind of sprung up organically as well, was that you have to have faith in the team, their ability to deliver. And this example, we were doing some organics work, and the art lead actually came up with this idea. He said, I know Dhruva, from their previous work, I know that they can hit the look that we want, but we've noticed that it's taken a long time to get there. How can we improve upon that? So this is great. He came up with this idea. It's like, well, what if I set off the initial path for them so that they're not spending so much time trying to read my brain. So he would take the asset to about 25%, and then he would send it over to Dhruva, they'd communicate, and then they would bring it to the finished level. And once he finished that first asset, they were able to kind of expand upon and do more. Again, this sounds, it should sound pretty simple, but it's sharing techniques and assets. And this is really about making sure that it's a level playing field. It's really hard to expect, whether it's an artist down the hall or an artist across the world, to hit the target that you want if they don't have access to everything that you do. And again, this is something that we learned when we observed when we were doing some work. And I was asking the art lead, well, how's everything going? And he's like, oh, it's okay, but it seems like they're not getting to the final touches. And we said, well, what can we do to help them? And what are we doing differently here? Is there anything that they might not have? And he's like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't think I passed them off all the alphas for ZBrush, or there's certain stamps that we're using. And that simple conversation that we had with our team, and the philosophy of setting that other team up for success was really important. It only took them a very minimal amount of time, but the payoff was great. And what we ended up doing in this example was we actually recorded some ZBrush videos and shared it with a partner. And then from that, we saw immediate results and benefits from that. So just being open and transparent about your working processes, sharing as much as you can. Benevolence, I think having the intent to do good, and this for me ties back to that symbiotic relationship. We are dependent on each other. All of our external engagement relationships, we need each other to succeed, and to have that intent to make sure that we can do as much as possible to kind of reduce that uncertainty. So having on-site visits, kickoff calls, video conferencing, monthly check-ins, and even sharing our work in Engine were all small things that we've done to kind of make sure that we're showing the intent to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're going forward with the best intentions. And then openness and transparency. Feedback on work, it doesn't really help if we hold back, if we're worried about bruising egos or hurting other people's opinions. It's really important that the artists communicate clearly and honestly. We have weekly production updates, and the point I wanted to bring out here was that the things that I asked the producers from the external teams to do is actually flag off any slippages in dates. If we usually have an original estimation of when the asset will come back. And in the weekly production updates, I also asked them that if there's any change in plans, please kind of call that out. And it's not so much to lay fingers or blame on why it's happening, but it's really just being open and transparent. We work in an industry that is, I'm not going to say volatile, it's just full of change. And we can't plan ahead. I'd like to say that we know, if we can say, I know exactly what I'm going to build and how we're going to build it, and we're going to do it exactly that, like 3 years before, that'd be great. I think, in all honesty, the best we can project out is maybe 3 to 6 weeks right now with some certainty. Longer term planning, is more rougher. So understanding that is to monitor and continually see how the progress is. And I just want the teams to be honest and say, hey, something happened. It doesn't matter what happened. It could be that we wanted iterations, or maybe that the work wasn't clear, but just be open about it. Long-term capacity planning, again, when we can project longer-term plans, it's great to share. And also when the project's going to ramp down, just so that everyone's on the same page.
Another big thing of building trust is cross-promotion. It's a little bit, we have touched upon it, but especially for the artists on my side, it's about making them really excited about upcoming work. As well as doing that, also seeing the final integrated assets, because we can't have the engine in this case. Just having their artist, taking a screenshot, sending it back, it means a lot to get that kind of, I don't know, after you've done something, you really see the end result. Same thing on the other side, getting people excited about the work coming in. And this is, as Adrien said, that will also lead to that some art leads are coming to Adrien saying, hey, can I also work with these guys? I've seen all the good stuff they've been doing, rather than Adrien going to them and like, hey, you should probably work with these guys. So you get a very symbiotic and kind of a trust that is built up from within rather than getting pushed down the throats of people. So
yeah, I was going to touch on a few points on this. Unfortunately, we can't share our engine. This is vain, so we're not doing integrated outsourcing. And again, that's just kind of one of the initial conditions we had. But one of the things that popped up was really interesting. Once we had worked with Erik's team for a while, he said, our artists would really like to see how their assets look in game. And I was like, that's really easy for us to do. And to show them the context, and they were super excited. And I realized it was such a simple thing to do, but to have that motivation back to the teams that are supporting us, to show them how they're contributing to our project. They love hearing that they're doing well. They love hearing that we love receiving their work. Those small things go a long way into building that trust with the external team. The one thing I wasn't really expecting from this round for my job was, in the past year and a bit, was actually doing a lot more PR, and I talked to my team about it, was the scope of this current project was a lot bigger in terms of external development. So we had to spend a lot more time talking to our team to say, hey, I think you don't have capacity right now to do all the awesome stuff that you want to do for this game. How can we help you out? And then convincing them that an external partner can actually help them achieve those goals. And so the whole cross-promotion thing is really interesting, because we have weekly reviews, and we'll show the art directors, and we'll have a meeting with the art leads, and we'll be showing them work. And I'm not sure if you guys have this in your studios, is our internal art team is always like, we can do it better than anyone. Why should we send the stuff out? And
never heard that, or?
And the great thing is, though, if you kind of set up the conditions, one of my favorite moments was when we start showing stuff and they'd be like, wow, what is that? Where did that come from? And they're like, hey, by the way, I was like, that's one of our partners, not one of our internal artists. And they're like, no way. And from that, then they'll come to me afterwards and they say, hey, Adrien, those guys did pretty awesome on that asset. Do you think they could try helping me out on my level? I might need some help. And so for me, that was a huge win, and it's something that wasn't really expected, going on this round. But it's been really fun to watch that engagement and that trust, because once, they see that when they see an external partner can actually help them out, they're way more engaged. So we talked about how we define trust, how we kind of built it up for our projects. What are some of the benefits that we see from this? Because you're saying, well, why go through all of this? We've seen improved efficiency. The quality bar has been better, a lot more stability. Willing to try new unproven processes, and this is kind of interesting. And this point might not apply to everyone, but I thought it was really important to, once you've established kind of a good working relationship with a partner, I love it when you can kind of send them something that is a little bit more uncertain. And because, again, game development is full of change, and I don't know what kind of challenges we'll be facing a few weeks down the road, a few months down the road. And it's great when you find partners that you can trust and say, hey, here's a chunk of work. I don't know how we're going to solve this, but you guys have been awesome in the past. Can you give it a go? Flexibility, as always, is good. Scalability, sharing, and then just making sure we have the same goals and same direction.
So looking at the challenges, well, these are the challenges that kind of come with the focus on trust. It's not necessarily because you have trust, but that you focus so much on trust. And it's really coming back to monitoring trust, making sure that you don't forget that that is the key, that you're always constantly looking at, do we still have the same trust? Is everyone on the same page? Is everyone believing in what we're doing? Same thing with the pipeline. You might need to change some things. You might need to be more loose in some things, more strict in others. Just being open and looking at where are we now? What can we do with this trust that we gained, and how do we keep it? Obviously, new people coming in, new type of work. These are the times when you really need to realize that, okay, this guy might not have the same trust as we built up, and how do we quickly get him in to understand that this is how we work? Same thing with new work coming in, treat it as new work. Have it as a little test, or make sure you put the right people on it. Don't just think that because everything is going well, this should also go perfectly well. So it's just being honest and kind of realizing that this is founded by the trust that we have built.
So with all of that, we actually wanted to show you a few case studies. We'll start off with one that didn't go so well, because I think it's really important to say, hey, it's great that we have all this theory, and then if you do all these things, it'll magically work. And no, sometimes it doesn't work. But I think it's really important to learn from those mistakes or those things that didn't go as well. In this particular example, our team was ramping up to do some organic work, some rock work, and we hadn't, to be honest, it was pretty big in scope. We quickly realized we had a very small team, couldn't get all done internally. So we kind of turned to our external partners and said, hey, we've got this kind of ambiguous work we need some help on. Can you please help us out on it? And one of the things that, up front we should have known that it kind of lacked clear expectation of success. And I think we had mentioned about the talk from Virtuous and EA yesterday, and I said this should be a red flag, because if you don't set the boundaries and set the conditions of what success looks like, that could be a problem. And what we observed was there was a lot of churn and rework, and we just kind of went through weeks, and I didn't have any doubt that our partners had the ability, the competency to hit the detail and to deliver on the high-res sculpting. But we just were spending so much time trying to hit this final look. And so after all of this, I went back to our team and said, well, what went wrong? Like, why did it take so long? And what could we do better? And it kind of became apparent that we weren't really trusting our partner in this sense, or partners. And the key thing that came out of it was the success was really dependent on both teams. If we didn't set up the initial conditions to help them succeed, it was really hard for them to hit what we want. So it's, again, that symbiotic relationship. And it was an interesting point to, again, we've been doing this for a while, but we just kind of lost sight of it for a bit here. And so our teams realized, oh, crap, we need to really look at external partners as they're extensions of our team, and we need to help them out as much as possible. It is of no interest of us to not support them. Ultimately, the more we put into it, the more we get back. We noticed that communication was kind of splotchy again at this point. I think we're still handling things through email, and I know it's 2013 at that point, but we realized we really have to find a better solution for that and just get the teams to talk to each other and be open about the communication. Defining targets that's kind of really being about open and transparent about what we expect from our partner and what we want them to do. And I think in the future cases when we have these ambiguous tasks, we now just go to the partners and say, hey, you know what, we don't have all the answers right now. This is an ambiguous task. And so it kind of at least sets the tone to let them know, it's we might be seeing a bit of churn, but at least everyone's on the same page about that. And then, again, sounds simple, but just provide the tools and assistance on this one. So taking that, the next asset that we tried out, we said, okay, what can we take from what didn't work, or what could be better, and then how can we apply it for the next thing, and hopefully, it'll be better. And so I'm going to use the example of the space barrel. Space barrel. Or space keg. It looks like a beer keg. And so, this is the initial concept art, and this is the spec sheet that we send out. And we talked a bit about, moving beyond, specifications. So one of the first things we did was we made sure that our partners had our updated style guides. As development, sometimes when we had begun the initial engagement, we had some ideas of here's our style guides, this is how we build stuff. But then as you develop things, it's a constantly changing playing field. So in this case, we're like, hold on, do they have the updated information? Is there anything that we have to share with them? And we realized at this point, we had done a few different things in terms of modeling. We were, I'm sure as everyone is right now, venturing into PBR. So we had our own workflow. So we said, well, gotta make sure that they have all the information. We made sure that the partners had examples of how we wanted things to get done. And that was a good starting point. I'm gonna go back to concept share. We felt that it was actually a really unique tool, and this was one of those organic things that came out from it. It was something that a partner was willing to try. We're willing to trust and try something different on, because again, most partners have their established kind of workflows. The one thing I really enjoyed watching this was just the communication back and forth. That an artist like Dhruva is about 12 hours difference from us, and so what I liked was they would post a question up and say, hey, I'm not sure how to interpret this part or how to solve this problem. And our artists can jump online at about 11 o'clock at night and really spend no more than 30 seconds, but they can fire off a quick response. And then by the time they got back in the morning, the corrections had been made. And in the previous way, for some reason, this interface just worked out way better. It spoke to the artist.
I think it was a lot of also that we could connect artist to artist rather than having managers or having emails coming back and forth. So it was much faster.
Absolutely. And I realized what we were doing was we weren't actually trusting the individuals. We were like, well, we must funnel this through some project manager or some producer. And you know what? It was so much better when the artists just spoke to each other. And then again, just sharing tools, sharing all the different things that we've been learning about. So, which kind of lands us on this kind of interesting contrast between something that didn't work and then something that kind of worked a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think, the foundation was probably the trust. There was many things within it. A lot of it was communication and kind of just the mindset of being in the same boat. But I think it's still kind of with the same intent, we had a little failure and a great success, and we learned a lot about it. It was almost a year ago now, so we did that rock, so we got a long way. And yeah, I think going over to the conclusions, these are really the two things that we took out of this. Of course, the trust, that's why we had that as a subject. That is the main thing, trustworthiness, but also the symbiotic relationship, always thinking of your partner as like, if it's their success is your success. So, and that is from both ways, so. Yeah.
This is just a personal comment or approach. I always think that business relationships are very similar to interpersonal relationships. The more you put into it, the more rewards that you reap out of it. And as all of us in this room are involved with external development, I think personally, I think it's always better to kind of go in there really open and understand that the more that you help the other person succeed, the more that you'll succeed as well. And the more closed off you are, that's what you might expect. And I think there's different conditions. I mean, everyone has different projects and different considerations, but I always, if you have the time, I think that's something that's really worthwhile to develop. And the rewards that you reap from that slight change of perspective might be really beneficial. I want to thank you for your time.